Welcome to Fear with Christine Spratley. Living like a head in charge, the podcast where Christine says fear, questions everything, and takes bold action. Christine Spratley is a former professional boxer, nanny, and 29-plus year corporate warrior turned founder of HBIC Advisors, where she is a public speaker and coach. She's been saying fear her whole life, many times without even realizing it. So tune in, spread the word, and get ready, because this isn't about aging with grace. It's about aging with mischief, audacity, and having a damn good story to tell.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between. Welcome to Fuck Fear with Christine Spratley, living like a head bitch in charge in HBIC. I hope you're having a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening. And if not, we are going to have one today. We have been talking a little bit more about business and things we do in business as women and some things for your pantry. Well, this kind of today is still on business. And what it is about is I am taking things from my pantry, and not just my pantry, but the section in my pantry that comes from the boxing gym. As I think some of you know or might not know, I was a boxer at Richard Lord's. I fought out of Richard Lord's boxing gym in Austin, Texas. It was just a brief time in my life, but I did fight professionally. I was 3-2, and it was back before doing any of that was cool or popular or any of it. And I fell into it by accident, if you can kind of fall into boxing by accident. But from that, I actually take a lot of things that were said to me in training or in fights, and ended up applying them in business, either said to me or experiences that I had. And if there's one thing I can tell you about me is that I usually learn the lesson way down the line. So I may not act like I'm listening or behave like I'm listening, but I tend to catch up to it later, because typically if I don't listen and I don't learn it right away, I typically repeat it. And so, it's one of those things where you do it until you learn it, And so today is going to be kind of fun, because that's a special time for me in my life. And I was really kind of reflecting on different mantras and things that have gotten me through. And one of the things that I think really, this is going to sound, I don't know how it's going to sound. So Joe, I'd like some feedback on this. But sure. Before, when you're meeting your opponent at the center of the ring, the ref, the last thing he says is protect yourself at all times. And that may sound, well, you're in a boxing match, so you protect yourself at all times. And what that means is that until the bell stops and until the ref comes in and calls the other person off, you have your hands up and you are protecting yourself at all times. No one's going to stop this for you. Like, you cannot just go uncle. There's no, you have to literally throw in, your corner has to throw in your towel, or you have to go sit in your towel like Roberto Duran did, when he went to his corner or whatever, or take a knee. Other than that, you're fair game out there. And I think this is really good for me to learn in business. And I didn't learn this for a long time in business. And protect yourself at all times really meant to me, because the first few times in my first few jobs or whatever, it was, this is family, and but protect yourself at all times. Really what it means is that you're in a business. You're in a corporation, you're in a company. And while it may be a family-owned company, but it has a function of its own. And its first and foremost priority is not to protect you. It's to pay you after it's paid everything else and done everything else. But it isn't to protect you. That is your responsibility. And I had to learn that. I had to learn that in all levels, from how I interacted, and it doesn't mean like protect as in everything's ogre and, coming at me. But as women, there are a lot of things coming at us in business. But I literally had to protect myself at all times. What am I doing to protect myself, to advance myself, because part of protecting myself is always advancing myself and always looking out. And the other thing is always look, protecting yourself here means being ready for the next job or the next opportunity, whether it's with the company you're at now or not. And I didn't realize that for a long time. The other thing that I recently watched some sparring video of mine, and I can hear Richard and multiple people in the gym going, "Keep your hands up. Keep your hands up, Sully." My last name at the time was Sullivan, so everybody called me Sully from the time I was little, and they called me Sully in the gym. And it was keep your hands up, keep your paws up, and that is again goes into get your paws up, be aware, don't get tired. And typically, that for me is when I'm tired, your hands drop. And there's a couple things that go along with keep your hands up, and it's stay low, bend your knees. Because in boxing, when you get tired, and it's towards the end of the round, maybe it's round 3 or 4, and you typically drop your hands, put your chin out, and you stand straight up, and you are just a target. So think about this: when you're tired, you don't want to do it, you're just done. Think about what you're exposing. Is there anything, when you're getting ready to take a shortcut, or when you're tired and you're not recuperating, you're not resting yourself, which we tend to do that. I know I was talking to a woman who I'm coaching, and she was talking about being, burnout and, exhausted. And it's this rest, don't quit. But again, it's like when we're tired, where are our weaknesses at? Well, how do you prevent your weaknesses? You stay in, you get low, you put your hands up, and you tuck your chin, and you take this little breather. And for me, because I was taller than a lot of my opponents, typically when I dropped weight, I fought at 112. And so I was typically fighting people that were shorter and stockier than me. So they'd have to come in. And so I could kind of cover up, keep low, keep my jet, and put my hands up, and they'd hit me, but I'd be covered up. And so I could take a little breather. But when I'm tired, I tend to get lazy. And I don't say it's lazy. That's not the right word. I just let guards down. I'm not as alert. And so I had to learn in boxing, when you're tired, first of all, get in shape. But second of all, be in it for the long haul. And when you're finding yourself tired, cover up, be strategic in how you approach. And that's one of the things that I love that is, I can just hear him. And one time, this is how bad it was. We would be sparring, and Richard never gave me a lot. Or anybody else. And I'd be in training with him, and he'd be like, Sid, put your hands up. And he'd just smack the crap out of me until I did, because it was the bell hadn't rung yet. And I wasn't done, and I couldn't throw in a towel. I mean, we were just, he was working out with me, but literally he was like, no, you're going to go through this. You stepped in this ring. I have to remember I stepped in the ring. There's another, the rounds are 3-minute rounds, full 3-minute rounds. I always fight full 3-minute rounds. And Richard would always tell me, you can do anything for 3 minutes. Now, I don't think that's true.
I don't think I can dead out sprint for 3 minutes.
But maybe I can do it for 3 seconds. Maybe I can do it for 2 minutes. Whatever it is, women, that you're going through, give yourself, is it 5 minutes? Is it 2 minutes? Is it a minute? Is it 30 seconds? Whatever you have to do, you can do this for this next 10 seconds and then check in. Don't quit until the next sling, and then decide if you want to re-up. The other one, there was another one that I loved. And Jesus used to, Joe, when you look at my videos, you'll hear this, especially in the sparring video. Where you at? Sully, where you at? And what it was and how this translates for me in business was in the ring, or not in sparring, or when I was in the ring, was, where are you at? Pay attention. Where's your environment? Pay attention. You're kind of zoning out here. Pay attention. Where are you at? And typically what that meant was my head was up and I wasn't leading with my jab. And he would just be all the time, where you at, Sully? Sully, where you at? And it was like, this thing. And now in business, sometimes I get so wrapped up in putting out a fire and responding, or sometimes I get emotional, or I get overwhelmed. And I say sometimes as in now, but back when I was in corporate especially, I would get in the moment of everybody else, and I'd have to kind of shake myself out a little bit and go, okay, where are you at? Where are we? And I would always look at my feet, not in the boxing ring, but in business, and be where my feet were. Okay, kind of snap out of it. Where am I? Then there's another one, and you've probably heard this. Maybe I don't think it's Richard's saying in and of itself, but stick and move. Stick and move. Hit and go. Get your stuff done and then move on. Do it and in business where I applied this a lot was say what I need to say, get in there, get it done, and get out and be done with it. I don't need to be just hanging out there yapping for yapping's sake. I need to have a reason. I need to stick. And the other part about stick is it needs to be, because I was tall again, and so I led with my jab, and my jab was that was my stick. It was stick, hit it, pop, 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 pop. And so in business and in corporate, I had to really kind of sit there and go, okay, where do I want to stick it? How do I want, where do I want to go in and hit and then move on from here? And then also a lot of times with my clients, where do I want to have them hit it? Because I was a consultant. So it was like, where is their stick? Where is their most potent thing? And then how do we move it forward? And where is the next move? Because in boxing, you're always finding your next move. You're always pivoting. That's another thing is you would always pivot, because I couldn't, for me, my best was to be on the run, not on the run, but always moving, make them chase me. And make them, as they would tell me, make them eat my jab all the way to me, and then stay low when they're inside, But I love that. And I think one of the other things was when you're on the ropes, sometimes you got to punch your way out, because they're so far in on you, and you just punch your way out. And that has been very much something where I've had to just in business punch my way out. Just go, okay, here we go. We're just gonna, and it's almost like and you don't hold your breath in boxing. Literally, Richard, I'd come back to the corner and Richard'd be like, hey, Sully, you're not breathing, breathe. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? He's like, you're not breathing, you're holding your breath. And I used to do that. But again, it's like, okay, you get in this tunnel, and you don't always have to do this in business. But what I've learned is that what helps me is when I get stressed, or when I get, not even sometimes I do it now before I get stressed. Actually, I have days where I'm on the ropes, where things have got to get done in order for me to move forward. I got to get my business development stuff out. I've got 5 things waiting for people today, literally 5. And they all know, because they've been hitting my inbox. Where is this? Where is this? Where is this? And so this afternoon, after I get done taping here, I go and I put my head down, and it's just, I've got to punch my way out. I've just got to nail it out. It's going to take as long as it needs to take, and I've got to get it done. And it's where you commit. Okay. Where you commit. And you're in a situation, whether it be in a boardroom meeting, whether it be with a client or wherever, and you've got to commit to finishing it and getting through it. And I don't necessarily mean punch as in punch your opponent or punch your client or punch your, person on the other end or your colleague. I don't advise that. But it means, all right, deep breath, ante up, here we go.
Your event doesn't just need a host, it needs a ringmaster of energy. Christine Spratley reads the room and keeps the momentum rolling like a damn orchestra conductor. With insight, humor, and a splash of mischief, she'll make sure your event isn't just organized, it's electric. After Christine takes the stage, your audience will be fully present, fired up, and not scrolling on their phones. Book her now at ChristineSpratley.com.
The other one that we would always hear, and you'll hear this all the time, is punch through the bell. And at the end of a round, you hear the bell. And typically when people hear the bell, not typically, I shouldn't say typically, good fighters, when they hear the bell, you'll see a flurry. Ba, 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 ba. And when we were in the gym and we were working mitts, it was literally that bell would go off and you would have to punch through the bell. And as fast as you could, as hard as you could. Because sometimes, not always, but sometimes your opponent doesn't punch through the bell. They don't have their hands up. What happens, they hear the bell and they stop. And if you're a runner, you've heard run through the finish line, run through it, run past it. It's the same thing. Only for me, it was, ooh, wow, not only am I able to go through it, but I'm able to maybe, they're not. They're not. And so I could take them out. I mean, it could be that little second and I pop somebody with a right or my jab or an uppercut, and that's what it is. And in business, it's the same way. So those are some sayings, but then there's some other things that I want to give you. And one of them was there was a big poster. There were all these boxing posters in the gym. And if you can, I don't know if I think he's still got pictures of his old gym and stuff. But it was, if you can imagine an old boxing gym up there, it was, Richard Lord's boxing gym was just that. It was an old garage type warehouse building, roll up the big door on it. It had big ring and then bags everywhere, speed bag and heavy bags and, different bags. And then, just all sorts of other stuff of equipment. But they would have these posters. And one was, if I remember correctly, it was, basically it was, this is where you outwork your opponent. Is your opponent training now? And that's one of the things that I really had to understand in business is that, again, it wasn't harder, it was smarter. But am I willing to do what others are? And I can't complain if I'm not willing to do that. Couple things here. That doesn't mean, because there's been times in my life, especially now, where I'm not willing to do nearly as much for nearly as long and nearly as hard. But I also don't expect the same results in the same manner. They may be similar results or similar numbers, just in a different manner. Because I've found a different, this is very different. I'm not in a big four. I'm not working, everybody's just coming off, and big four is coming off of a busy season where they're working like 60, 70 hours a week, if not more. They're just going nuts. So again, I don't choose to do that anymore. But there were times in my career where I didn't want to work, but so-and-so was willing to work. Now, a couple things about that. There were other times in my career where I worked harder or just as hard and had a better product and didn't get the props that I wanted or the results that I wanted because they were doled out to other people. And what that meant for me was, well, then I need to look at that environment. And if that environment is not rewarding my work and it's not equitable, then I either need to change my environment, which is move me, or I need to change it within the system. And a lot of times for me, I was able to get to a point to where I could either change it in the systems, but there have been times where I've moved systems and authorizing environments because I was realizing that I did work as hard or harder than my competition, and I wasn't getting the results that I wanted. So again, how hard am I willing to work? And this is something where I had to really be honest with myself too, because I don't want to work like I worked when I was 30. I don't. So what does that mean? For me, that means a different lifestyle. It means different priorities, both in my personal life, but it also means being smarter, not harder. But then there are times too when I do have to punch through the bell and punch my way out off the ropes. And because I do it in spurts now, I don't do it for months on end, although it feels like this has been months on end, these last 7-8 months. Then there's one thing, and this is really important, and I'll never forget this event. It was sparring day, and not Saturdays were always sparring day, but then there would also be days where we would come up to the gym, and sparring day was everybody, any clients could come in and spar, but that was on Saturdays. Other days we would go in and there would be all of the stable would be in there. And when I mean stable, I mean all the professional fighters. And again, I didn't fight for like years and years and years, but when I did, I was part of that team. And or I'd go in and I would be having a training, and it would be with Richard, and he'd gear up, and or with Jesus sometimes, or with Anissa, or some of the other people in there. And this one was with Jesus. And Jesus El Matador Chavez, he was the main pro out of that gym at the time. He's an amazing boxer, funny as hell, and just good, really good. And one of the just, I don't know how to describe him except just fluid, way fluid. And I think you can look it up, Joe, because I think that he moved up in weight class after I left, but I thought he fought, I'm going to get this wrong, he fought heavier than flies, so I'm trying to think of what weight he fought at. But anyway, he was great, and he was lethal. I mean, the guy was lethal. So we're sparring, practicing, but sparring, training. And I got him. I got one hit in, and it was a jab. And he doesn't like that was like, yeah. And what it is okay, on the four corners, you can't see this if you're just listening to me, but think about it. So I got him at one corner, right? And what he did, the remainder of all three corners, because that's what we did. We just went around the ring, each side, boom, 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 boom. And he either hit me, first of all, he started hitting me in the head, which is fine. I mean, fair game. I mean, get my chin down. But then he hit me in the gut. And he hit me, not in the gut, he hit me on the side. And I took a body shot. And I'll never forget this. I will never, ever, ever forget this. And it did teach me something about business. I hit him. He hit me in the head. And so I kind of was like, okay, I got this. And then he hit me in the gut. And it wasn't like, we're going to play with the girls hit. It was, what the fuck did you do? You don't touch me hit. And I'll never forget, it hurt so bad. Like it's one of those where your body literally just seizes, and what happens is your body, you can't straighten up because your body is literally crunching on the side. And so you lean down, and it was on my right side. And I had my hand up because, to protect my head. And I just remember, and I couldn't come back. I couldn't do anything. Like my body was in, and he proceeded to pound the crap out of me the whole way around the ring. And I just never, and all I could do was just keep moving. And, and he just, I'll never forget the look on his face, ever. And what happened was, God made it through. The bell rang. I didn't punch through the bell. I just covered up. I didn't punch off the ropes. I stayed off the ropes because that's the only way, because I knew if I ever, and he didn't, keep in mind, as much as it was painful and as much as he came at me, he was not unleashing the fury of Jesus Chavez on me. Okay. He was teaching me a lesson. And so later I'm done, the gloves were off and I was, on the speed bag or something. Cause that's usually what we'd do is afterwards we'd go to the speed bag cause your arms are real tired and they'd and he's like, and that's when he came up and he said, nice shot. And I didn't even acknowledge it because I knew better. And so what does that all mean for business? For business, what I learned is if you are sitting with the big guys and you're in the room and you get a shot, be prepared for the onslaught. Be prepared. And because it's coming. So one, you better make sure you know your shot. And that's what I didn't know. I didn't know that because I just didn't think I'd be able to get it in. And there's been many times where I've sat in business and gotten one in and then didn't know what to do. And then the onslaught came because I couldn't advance it. It was that, stick and move. I didn't move it. I just took it. I just gave it. And then I just absorbed the onslaught. But then there were times in business where I was like, okay, I'm going to go out. I know because I've done my work. I've done my research. I'm getting ready to go in this negotiation or whatever. I know this like the back of my hand. This is where I'm going to take them down. This is how I'm going to do it. And they're going to come back. And they're going to come back with a fury. So do I want to cover up? How do I want to prepare for that? Because if you get a shot in at the big dogs, they're big dogs for a reason. They didn't get there overnight. And so it was just a really great lesson. And then the great ones later, when it's all said and done, will come back and tell you, nice shot. They will. They'll acknowledge that. They may drag you around the ring, but they'll acknowledge that because that's what great ones do is they acknowledge, hey, I wasn't covered up. I was exposed there for a second. So when you're wanting to go out there, and I didn't know any of this for a long time in business. I wanted to go, I didn't know. I was young. I thought for a long time, and I thought people that had money and drove nice cars and did things, and that was success. And I thought because I was young and it was fun having those things and being around people that did. But what I didn't understand was, now it's like I want to be around people that have had money through after the recession, that have life and that are happy. But those are the big dogs now for me. There's a different criteria, but for you women that are sitting there and whoever your big dog is, and I don't care, you can take this in life, whatever you're sitting at the table with and you get a shot in, okay? And I don't necessarily mean take down shot, ooh, I'm, disrespecting you or whatever. But when you get something in, don't expect something back. Expect it back and expect it to be sustained. And I think that is one of the best things that I ever learned was once I get my shot in, don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop. And what is it? There's a saying that, don't look at your handiwork, and admire it. But especially in business, for me, I had to learn that. And I learned that the hard way because I got drug around outside the boxing ring quite a few times, and I probably will because I tend to like to just, not, I like to look at my handiwork. Every once in a while, I'll step back and say, "Woo, look at me." But I do have to remember that go through it, keep going, keep moving forward. And then the great ones will come back around and they'll acknowledge your goodness, So I'm hoping, I've been trying just a little lead up. I've been trying to get Jesus and have him be a guest on because I'd love to have him. I'd love to talk about, I don't know if they were good old days, they were younger old days. But I wouldn't change it for the world. But hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, you can take some of this in here. And I'd love to hear your things that you've heard and taken with you. And but again, just remember that there's an opportunity out there for you. Okay? But you have to protect yourself at all times. And that means thinking about and understanding your environment, keeping your hands up, not being exposed and landing, sticking it. Again, for me, learning my jab was my key point. If they're going to come at you, make them eat your jab all the way to you, So until next time, enjoy, have fun, and remember, you are enough. Tubs, ladies.
Thanks for tuning in to Fear with Christine Spratley. Living like a head in charge. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, tell her what topics you want to hear, and share this episode with someone who could use a pantry full of boldness in their life. Remember, life isn't about aging with grace. It's about aging with mischief, audacity, and having a damn good story to tell. So show up, take action, and keep saying fear.